Here we are with another episode of Wednesday Night Sessions, and I apologize in advance. I'm not Terry Gross, and this isn't Fresh Air. Very much something different. I am Mitch Nobis, your host. Regular viewers, welcome back. We have kind of an ongoing, I make fun of myself because we have kind of two home offices here, and so you can see you joining us today from my remote learning classroom, which is by rule supposed to be drab. So I apologize to those of you who are into the whole room rater thing. I'm aware it's a zero. There are parts of the house that are full of books. It's not in the remote classroom. So thank you for joining us again. I'm excited today. We have Paul Flower, a novelist from the west side of Michigan, on our program. As again, regular viewers know, we try to mix local writers. We try to get Metro Detroit, Michigan at large. And then since we're in the pandemic and remote, occasionally national writers as well, people who couldn't normally swing through Michigan. So I'm excited because today we have another West Sider. We've had a couple of West Side Michigan writers on recently, and Paul is another one of those. And like normal, I'll let him introduce himself to us, but I do want to say one thing, that this is an exciting episode because he is clairvoyant. He can predict the future. Paul is getting some cool traction on the news media here in Michigan lately because his novel seems to have predicted our current state of militiamen gone, I'll say apolitical, gone aggressive. How's that for a purely descriptive term? The militiamen gone aggressive lately. As we record this, it's mid-January 2021. Who knows? By the time this airs, maybe something different will have happened. Let's hope not. All right, at this point, I will toss it over to Paul to introduce the book and give us a reading. And then, of course, I'll be back with two questions when he's done.
Thank you, sir. My background is I've been a writer professionally for pretty much 4 decades, and primarily in the world of advertising and marketing. On the side, I've always dreamed of writing novels, and so being a writer, I was writing novels on the side. And first one was published a few years ago. Then this second book came out in 2019. It's published by actually a British publisher, Farrago Books in London, available on Amazon. And The Great American Cheese War was a story about the governor of Michigan getting caught up in a conspiracy involving a highly contagious virus, the West Michigan branch of the Michigan militia, and an attack on Wisconsin. And that was the idea behind the book. Again, it was published in 2019. And then in April of last year, suddenly I saw militiamen and women inside the state capitol with automatic weapons surrounding our legislators as they were debating rules proposed by the governor of Michigan. And I started getting a little nervous because it was a little close to home as far as the book, The Great American Cheese War. Then fast forward a few months and the plot involving Governor Whitmer and the Michigan militia and during this virus. And there was this crazy conspiracy theory underneath it. And it ended up in Wisconsin. The plot was going to end up in Wisconsin. All of those things are in the book. It's not the same. For example, in the book, the key difference is in the book, the governor of Michigan is actually one of the perpetrators of some craziness. But all of the central elements that were in my book were happening in real life. And then recently, in the last couple of weeks, with the tragedy at the Capitol in Washington, the idea of Michigan militia and other militia types being influenced by conspiracy theories and a right-wing zealot autocratic leader played out again on a national and international level. And again, that's what the book's about. So I've been called a witch online. I've been called clairvoyant. I just consider myself a writer. So here's the background of what I'm about to read. There are 3 featured militia members. One they call Zucker or Zook, another one they call Spud, and then a young woman named Mickey Spike. Mickey is married to the Michigan militia leader, Bo Watts. And she's a professional woman. She's a teacher and a cross-country coach. She grew up in the militia in Michigan. Her parents actually founded the chapter she's a member of, but she's begun to question her participation in the movement. So, and now she and these two men, Zucker and Spud, were at a militia camp in Paw Paw, which is in Southwest Michigan, near the border, not far from the border. When the word came down that this attack on Wisconsin, precipitated by Wisconsin attacking Michigan politicians with prairie dogs infected by the monkeypox virus over stolen cheese recipes that were taken to California by an actor named Denton McAllister, that this reprisal that's going to be initiated by the Michigan militia for this offense is supposed to start with them. So there's only 3 militia people, a pickup truck. They're heading toward Wisconsin, and they are armed to the teeth, but they're not really sure how this will play out. And they're not really sure what to do. But the 2 men are just thrilled to be doing it. They're thrilled to be funding part of an attack, and a militia attack that they can use all the things they've been training for. And Mickey, meanwhile, is just kind of freaked out because she doesn't know what to do and doesn't know what they're about to do. Mickey sighed and shook her head. They're in a pickup truck, by the way, on beautiful I-94. Mickey sighed and shook her head. This is messed up. She closed her eyes and pictured the 3 of them trying to fight an army of Wisconsin state cops and National Guardsmen. All I heard for the past month was how there was trouble. And when it hit, the call would go to the Paw Paw camp because it was the closest to Wisconsin. And that's where most of us come to train. So now it comes, and there were only 3 of us. I got no idea what we're supposed to do, what the mission is. She opened her eyes and twisted to look at Zucker. I mean, if we're supposed to do something big, we're going to need help. Zucker was studying a barn in the distance. Mickey imagined the family who owned the barn. She saw them as red-cheeked, happy people. She wondered if Zucker could kill them, and realized he could. Zook, you called in others? He finally looked at her. You know the deal. I'm sure someone did call someone. And if they didn't, well, we're in this to send a message to the cheesers. Message is, we defend our home against disaster, crime, invasion, terrorism, and tyranny, Spud said. Exactly, Zucker said. And it don't say in there anything about how many of us there needs to be to do the defending, Spud said. Spudman's got it. Zucker stared at Mickey and gave her a wink and a wry smile. Damn straight I do. And it was the hand of God we all 3 had full gear stowed at Camp Pee-Pee, Spud said. You ask me, seems like the 3 of us is meant to do this. What if we hadn't been there? What if we had nothing but our sidearms with us? Or what if we never met each other? Know what I'm saying? Spud paused for a moment. Right place, right time. I mean, wow. He surveyed the highway ahead, pounded the steering wheel with a meaty right fist, and let out a whoop. Mickey sighed. She was playing out the scenario, trying to figure what to do, trying to think, and Spud wouldn't shut up. I don't even want to talk, but you're just forcing me to, so I get a minute without hearing your voice. Whoa, the lady scores, Zucker said. Spud didn't seem to feel the jab. Amped is all. Can't help it. Get this way when I'm going to war. He pounded the wheel with gusto. My dad would be wringing your neck about now, Mickey said. Always told my mom she couldn't let emotions get the best of her. That's what he told me. Your folks are legendary, man, Zucker said, nodding, his manner grave. Seriously, legendary. So, since she's second-gen militia, she's an expert on everything, Spud said. Mickey rolled her eyes. You just need to calm down. That's what I'm saying. She twisted to look at Zucker. So the guy or whoever called gave you the word and just hung up. Yep. Who'd you talk to on your callbacks? A man, then a woman, Zucker said. Guy was called Cobra. The other, she said? Chick named Pinky. And they both confirmed, word for word, Zucker said. This is the real deal. But what deal is it? I mean, what are we supposed to do here exactly? Mickey punched the dashboard. Anger bubbled in her chest again. Anger at Bo for being gone, and anger at Rub and her mom for being dead. Anger at all of them for leading her down the path to this moment. Saw this coming, you know, Zucker said. The cheeseheads jumping in like this. The one I can't figure is Denton McAllister, Spud said. That almost seems like made up. Love that dude in The Deer Hunter, Zucker said. The Deer Hunter, Mickey said. Yeah, the movie, you know. Mickey sighed. That was Christopher what's-his-name, she said, momentarily relieved at the diversion. No, it was him, McAllister, Spud said. Walken, Christopher Walken, said Mickey. Swear to God it was McAllister, Spud said. This works out. You can ask him yourselves, Zucker said. Figure we'll run into him. Prairie dogs, Mickey said, which supposedly don't even live here in Wisconsin, by the way. Someone brought them in just for this, way I heard it, Spud said. True that, man, Zucker said. Brought into a pet store. In Madison, I think it was, Spud said. Yeah, story was they told everybody the dogs was brought in to be like exotic pets. Zucker said. The same pet shop supposedly had some fancy rat imported from Ghana over in Africa that was infected with monkey whatever. A pouched rat, Spud said, or pooched. Maybe it was pooched or some shit. Weird name is all I remember. Yeah, Zucker said. It supposedly got mixed in with the prairie dogs in the pet store, infected them with, guess what? Monkeypox, Spud was saying, nodding like a goofy monkey. It was a big news story, only made it sound like the whole thing was an accident. Yeah, really, it was a test of this, like, biological weapons program the government was working on in its labs. Them and the, like, cheese industrial complex. Cheese industrial complex, Spud said. Exactly, Zucker said. This was a trial run. Original plan was families would buy the infected prairie dogs and get sick. Governor and his buddies all wanted to see how it would work. Problem was, instead of selling them to families, some dudes bought the whole bunch of them and let them loose out in the country. Bunch of people got sick. The governor and them made up the whole thing about the poached rat as a cover. What I heard anyway. Poached, I think, Spud said. Whatever, Zucker said. You realize none of that makes any sense, Mickey said. Spud acted like he didn't hear her. Last week up at Interlaken, I was talking to this guy we call Wazy about this. Wazy, he said he heard this pox or whatever could drop a man in like 3 days. You know Waze? Zucker said. Absolutely, Spud said. Waze and me go back, Zucker said. Him and me and a couple of others were up at Interlaken on an overnight, Spud said. Target shooting and some patrol tactical shit. He hung out with Nichols, you know that? Zucker said. Terry Nichols, I'm saying. Mr. Oklahoma City co-conspirator bomber himself. Absolutely, Waze. Waze knew Terry and James Nichols both, Spud said, back before the OK City bombing, of course. Both, Zucker said. Waze says to me, get this, says one night he was over at James Nichols' farm and Terry showed up. Then some guy called and James answers, then gives the phone to Terry. Terry suddenly gets all weird on the phone, talking code, Spud said. Who was calling? Timothy McVeigh, Spud said. This is like a month before the Oklahoma City bombing, and the guy who did it was talking to the Nichols boys. Wazy was there, swears it's true. I would have left that house right then. Those guys were certified. C-R-A-Z-Y, Mickey said. She ached again to go for a run, to pause this thing and let her mind float away for a while. Go easy, girl, Zucker said. Watch out who you're putting down now. Yeah, don't even start, Spud said. Bite me, Mickey said. You wish, Spud said. You're a moron, Mickey said. McVeigh was a baby killer. I don't appreciate baby killers. You want baby killers? What about Janet W. Reno and William B.J. Clinton? Zucker said. He put the cup down and was leaning into the space between the front seats. His breath was sour. Mickey swallowed and turned to look out her window. So you honestly believe it was okay to blow up a building filled with everyday people and babies? Babies. Who said McVeigh and Nichols did it? Zucker said. Whoever proved they were the only ones that did the Oklahoma City bombing. Oh, so your fallback is that McVeigh and Nichols were somehow framed by who? Every single department of the federal government? The same federal government that owned the building? Spud frowned and stared out his window. If it was just McVeigh and them that did it, he said, why were all the ATF and FBI guys out of their office in the federal building right when the bombs hit? They worked in the building, but all of them were out when the bombing happened. I don't know that that's true. If it is, it was a coincidence. Maybe they were just out, people go out. They had to be tipped off. Like I said, someone told them. Maybe they went to get lattes, Mickey said. She wished they would drop this. Sometimes it seemed like the militia was just a bunch of paranoid guys who liked guns and beer and talking conspiracy. Dudes thinking they knew insider stuff no one else knew, getting all worked up till one of them got the nerve to do something. She sighed. She sighed. It was 1995. Ancient history. Who knows anymore? What does that have to do with us today? With the three of us? What? Starting some kind of war?
Oh man, that was great. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Holy cow. We were, before we hit record, Paul and I were talking about, his clairvoyance, and he said, forgive me if I get the wording wrong, but he said something like, people say, where did this idea come from? How did you know this? He's like, this is just Michigan. Like, listening to that, if you're a native Michigander, like, we all know dozens of that guy, right? How did you just say it? Like, the paranoid guys who like guns and beer and conspiracies. Like, yeah, I went to school with a lot of those guys. I know a lot of those guys. We all have that neighbor. Like, that's, Michigan gets like a lot of press for like our gorgeous lakes and our beautiful, countryside, but we also have a lot of that guy. So I think you captured that well.
Thank you. One of the things I was going to mention about that, one of the inspirations for the book, and I want to stress that the book is what satire should be, I hope, which is it's intentionally really, hopefully really funny, with the intent of saying something serious. And one of the inspirations for the book was I recalled the day in the Detroit Free Press, I saw the picture of the house where the Nichols brothers worked with Tim McVeigh, or communicated with Tim McVeigh before the Oklahoma City bombing. And it was out in the middle of nowhere in Michigan. It was a dreary day. They'd taken the picture on a dreary day, flat farmland. It was that time of year where, like now, where the corn's all down to stubble, and it's always gray, and the gray of the trees goes into the gray of the sky. And I realized one of the things we have an abundance of here is a combination of this hunter outdoorsy culture, but connected to that is a gun culture. And then a lot of time, months where young men can fester in houses like that over issues like this. They can take something that's a lie or a half truth and fester over it and talk it over until it becomes huge. And that's kind of what happened with the plot against the governor. That plot was hatched 15 minutes from where I'm sitting, in the basement of a vacuum cleaner store, by young men festering over these things.
Yeah. And the human need for story, right? Like, how much does that play into these conspiracies? Like, you get these, I like how you kind of put that, there's these swaths of gray time in Michigan, and we fill them, like humans fill empty space, right? And so how many of these guys are filling that space with the need for storytelling? And that's where the conspiracies come in. Like, this belief that there's somebody pulling the strings behind the scenes, instead of like, life is just wild,
And also there's a need, and these characters, I hope, convey that there's a need to know something that other people don't know.
Yeah.
And when you talk to the people that, the people that attacked the Capitol in Washington, it's like, we know something's going on that not everybody knows is going on. Trust us. And it's like, no, there's none of that's really going on.
No.
And it's like, but we want to feel that it gives me power to have something you don't know.
Yeah. And it's, I think there's like we're not even close to the questions right now. We're way off track, but there's like a childhood naivete about it too. Like, we want the people in charge to be in charge, and we believe that they know something that we don't know. When then you grow up and you become an actual adult, and you realize, like, no, when they're having a secret meeting behind closed doors, they're really just talking about, in the case of these politicians, like poll numbers. Like, how's this going to track? They're not planning anything crazy behind the scenes. They're like, will this get us enough donations to run for election again? Which is a whole other problem. But like, it's also like the conspiracies are all just like, we need to keep money flowing so we can keep getting elected. There's no good monkeypox. Like, I love how, like, you, in your novel, it's such this like farcical way of getting, a pandemic, but then like that that's also just how pandemics happen. Like they jump species. Like this is what we're dealing with right now. Like there's nobody in a lab.
What's funny is when I wrote that, and I wrote this over, you trying to write stuff on the side when you're doing a day job.
Yeah.
I wrote that over a number of years, and it was like I just kept pushing the farce out as far as I could, thinking this is so ridiculous. People will get the point when I'm saying to satirize, and then it actually happened, and I was like, oh, I guess I didn't go far enough.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, like, look at Catch 22, look at other satires, and that's exactly the same thing happens. Like, you think you're making something wild and ridiculous, and then life outdoes it, you know? Well, that leads us right into the questions. My first question kind of connects to what you just said. So maybe you can expand on that a little bit more. In season 2 of Wednesday Night Sessions, you're our only novelist, I think. I might have to retract that if I think through the guest list, but you're certainly one of the few fiction writers. This season is mostly poetry, poetry writers. So tell us a little bit about your process. The first question is often kind of craft oriented. Tell us about your life as a writer. So the nuts and bolts, how did this book come about? How did you craft it? How long did it take? All that kind of stuff.
It took, actually 15, 20 years. Because I was doing another day job.
Yeah.
And I had 4 kids that we raised, and they're all gone now. Not gone. They come back. And I spent part of that time just kind of riffing. And for me, I just kind of let the characters talk to me, and I don't outline a lot. I don't sit down. I'm not patient with the process of let's think ahead and what's going to happen next. I kind of let the characters drive that. I kind of let the story put them in situations, and then let them tell me what's going to happen. But the basis for this actually was a prairie dog, monkeypox prairie dog infection. And you can Google it. That happened in the upper Midwest back in the 90s. I think it was the 90s, it was early 2000s. And that's where the book actually got its inspiration, because I heard that there's a thing called the monkeypox virus in prairie dogs in the upper Midwest. And I just thought it was funny because it just has a funny sound to it.
Sounds funny, yeah.
Right. So then I mixed in with it the atmosphere of West Michigan, which there's some not so thinly veiled characters in there of billionaire people that start a paramilitary company and want to handle insurrections and violence around the world and here locally. And so then I started working with the guys in the militia that I'd been around my whole life, not necessarily that they were militia members, but the Michigan guys that I know. And that's the process. Was just all of those things went together, and then I just kind of walked the character into the room and let them tell me what's going to happen.
Cool. I dig that. I'm also very happy to hear that it took 15 to 20 years, because I didn't write it down, but I'm in the middle of one of those myself. I'm around like year 14 or 15 on a.
Well, the first one.
I'm a teacher, so I work on it for like a week, a year in the summer, and get like 30 more pages. It's very
well, and people ask, did you work when you were at work? And I've been working remotely for 15, 20 years now. But when I was at work, sometimes sometimes I'd spend an hour on it. But what I found was committing an hour a day or a few days a week kept the story moving forward and in my head. But the first book took 30 years to publish. So
I am in the middle of that. I feel that. I know how that goes, for better, for worse. All right. Our second question, regular viewers know the second question is usually something a little bit more left field. And so I want to come back to this notion that Paul is clairvoyant and want to see what we can do with that. Because it's like you said, satire, it's hard to write satire because like life gets goofier. Like Cheese Industrial Complex sounds hilarious and is hilarious until like you get the real world and we have people who like think that pizza parlors are dens of iniquity, and like you can't outdo life, right? So for your second question, I'm going to ask you to try. right? So since you can, you're a seer, since you can predict the future, apparently. And since our society in some ways seems no longer satirizable, like we kind of outdo satire as a people. I'm just going to ask you, what comes next? Like, what comes next for America?
Well, here it's an interesting thing for me to stay on the writer subject. I'm writing a sequel,
Nice.
and I've told everybody who asks me that question about, well, so what are you going to predict that, like, do you make $1 million so you can retire? Do you predict that in the book? No, I predict the Tigers win the World Series for 10 years in a row, and the Lions win the Super Bowl. That's the first thing we get off. That's my first prediction.
And it's how we know it's satire.
Oh, ow. As far as a very serious thing is, I think the fact that we're now living satire, what we're actually living is an inability to grasp the truth and to understand a shared truth. And that gets deep, but it's the reality we're in. Is that even if whatever your political persuasion, if there's one party that continues to abide a big lie or a series of small ones and not confess that it's not true, then what we have is more of what we just had. And I don't mean that in a pessimistic, dark, sinister way, but satire hopefully reveals something about us. It says, there are a couple of guys out there who can think that there's prairie dogs infected by a monkeypox virus over stolen cheese recipes. Because we now know that there are worse conspiracies being parlayed, and they are adamant about them being true. There are people adamant about them being true. So the short conclusion to all of that is that I think until we can persuade ourselves to somehow break through and make the truth known to everyone and agree on where the sources of the truth are going to come from, then we're going to see more of this conspiracy theorizing influencing our politics.
That sounds right. That tracks, unfortunately, like you said. But yeah, it's until we can agree that certain things are certain things, that water is wet. It's hard to.
Yeah, even this past week, I know one of my particular local representative, denounced the Capitol attack, and then at the same time started talking about how we need to reform election laws and how we should have more of an investigation into the election. And I'm like, no, now we're back to what's. Yeah. And until we can find a way to everyone to go, okay, we're gonna be honest and talk about what's true now.
Yeah. Yep, that would be a beautiful future. So let's hope we can get there. All right, Paul. Thank you very much for joining us today. That was a treat. And I hope your vision of a better future where we can agree on the truth comes through too. So you can be batting 1,000 on this. Okay. And the Tigers and the Lions. Like batting 1,000 would be great as a fellow.
All right. Cool.
All right. Well, thank you again, and regular viewers, we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.